been violated by Israel.
Exactly.
Who is America's
Puppet,
whatever you want to call it. But I mean, just pushing people out of their land. Maruim, give us just some examples of what's going on in Palestine. What is the Israelis doing?
Well, right now, sovereignty is definitely being denied of Palestinians. Actually, this month is the anniversary of the Oslo Accords being signed, and in this, it pretty much guaranteed that the West Bank and the Gaza Strip would be sovereign under Palestine, that it would be Palestinian territory. Israel has no right to be in these territories. But right now you have Israelis that are constantly in Palestine. They patrol Palestine. There are checkpoints in Palestine restricting the movement of these people. So, and within the past month, you have 6 Palestinian civilians who were killed by Israeli forces, all of them in refugee camps. So they were innocent civilians. Most of them were teenagers, ranging from, yes.
How can you be a refugee in your own country?
Exactly.
I'm a little confused.
Exactly. Well, in the 1948 creation of Israel, you had people that came from Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jaffa. At the time, it wasn't called Tel Aviv; it was called Tel Rabia. But now it is called Tel Aviv, the Hebrew name. And so these people who are from these cities were forced to take refuge in places either in Lebanon or Jordan, Egypt, Syria, or the West Bank and Gaza.
Under what reasoning? I mean, what Ben Yashhahal? What is the reason for the occupation? Obviously,
the occupation is to control Palestinians because Palestinians can't be trusted. They are afraid of what will happen to Israel and Israeli civilians if Palestinians aren't controlled. And it is just a way to control Palestinians. There is no fear. They know that Palestinians do not equate to the power of Israel. Yeah, this is just their reasoning in order to fool others of what's actually happening.
Waneek, I'm a little confused here. Israel, it's a sovereign nation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say about titles, and what names are when we talk about white supremacy, global white supremacy, and how they're used in militarism. Because I think that one of the issues that you're bringing up, that Maruim is very eloquent in speaking about, is the violation of human rights and people's right to be self-determined. And I think that one of the things that's happened over time when we look at Israel and America as twins, not just puppets, there is a need for global dominance. The false sense of supremacy and superiority. We say white supremacy like it really means it's something, but it's really oxymoron. There's no such thing as that. There's the idea that if you can perpetuate myths about people's dominance because they're militarily more strong, that's the only reason why they have dominance. Not because of integrity, not because of ethics, not because of the ability to be respectful of other people's right to exist. Right. So I think that the idea that you have a place that, if you go back beyond 1948, where there was an attempt to find a land post-Germany, post the Holocaust. Right. There was a search for land. It wasn't just, where we see now in Palestine. It started in Africa. They tried to start to find a place in Ghana, and there was a place where they were looking for Uganda. I think there's more Uganda than Ghana, and that didn't happen. That didn't work. So they settled upon Palestine, and it was easy for them to go and subjugate and invade and put up a wall and to begin to start to cause the apartheid that you see now happening there. Right. So when we talk about sovereignty, sometimes you have to get beyond the words, the semantics of the word sovereignty, because that's really what's happening now. There are people who are just being violated just because of their right to be human and self-determined. And the people around the world who are the exploited, the subjugated, the devastated, have to come together and determine and speak truth to power about the transforming of what that power is. And until that happens, you still have this word game being played out where you don't even get a chance to see it on mainstream media or corporate media. What's happening on a daily, how many people are being killed now, slaughtered, because they're taking over someone else's land. And it's justified because even in international law, it's a great violation, but who's going to police the police? Who's going to be responsible for making sure there is a consequence for such violations?
Oh, I know George Bush, he tried to police Russia when they invaded Georgia, but I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked.
Well, can I actually
Yes,
touch
yes,
on
yes.
a point you made? And I think it's important to note that Palestine's sovereignty was violated even before the Holocaust, because in 1919, the Balfour Declaration was signed, giving Palestinian land to the Jewish people. Even before the Holocaust, even before the mass murder of the Jewish people, our land was promised to somebody else.
Right.
And that's why this isn't talked about, but before 1948, there were many Palestinian revolts against the British occupation and against these new Jewish settlers, because they knew what it eventually meant was all our lands being taken away.
And I think, and that's important, again, back to words and understanding the difference between and differentiating between Jewish people, Israel, Zionism, because what really is happening, because you do have those, who are taking claim under Zionism, and the majority of the Jewish people are not even in agreement with that. But you can't get, any popular, can't do a poll, of the Jewish people who are in Israel to determine whether or not they agree or don't agree with the Zionism and the government's taking full control over the right for people to be self-sufficient and self-determined. Right. But the main thing I think that's important there is that when you begin to start giving the impression that people are anti-Semitic and people are, so you use these terms and you throw them around real loosely, to give the impression that they're being violated and also being destroyed. And if you go back to Hezbollah, where and the false news reports you get about what is happening, and they're bombing and killing innocent civilians, which is of course collateral damage. In any war zone, everybody is open season to be killed. But that's just another part of the historic level of world domination, and again, white supremacy and the exploitation of people around the world, particularly when we look at Africa now, why Africa and AFRICOM and what's happening with the military invasion of that. We have yet to see what is happening that we don't get to see on the news. That's right. On mainstream news.
You don't.
Well, just powerful information from these two very powerful individuals. For me, of course, sovereignty has a dual meaning. Obviously, a couple of years ago, I was plastered all over the TV as being a quote-unquote leader of the sovereign movement in Atlanta.
Leader of the sovereign.
Well, I would defer from that point. There are two levels of sovereignty. Right. There's a physical level that you all are talking about, which we would talk about when it comes to countries and lands and people. In America, they have made the term criminal. If one claims to be sovereign in America, in Atlanta, then it is or in Palestine, it becomes a criminal act. Okay. But the level of sovereignty.
But why?
Because the term itself defines an individual or a group that has a right to determine their own future, which the world governments then they take issue with, because that means you don't fall under their jurisprudence. Yeah. But
under the Patriot Act, in terms of now being termed as enemy combatants, so anyone who will want to take any stand that will allow them to be, if you will, self-determined and resistant, then they will be under that.
They will fall under as an enemy combatant. Right. But this is the thing that takes sovereignty away from the power of white supremacy, their spiritual sovereignty. See, I always, not, I didn't say biblical. I'm not going spook on you. I'm not going spooky on you.
Hold on. Spiritual is a Christian word.
Well,
do you research?
It goes back to Africa. It goes back to the original people, because
from the Comedians, the Egyptians.
Well, it's defined as a power that cannot be seen but does exist. So my point, as it relates to sovereignty, is that even though that they can redefine what sovereignty is in a nation where it has ancient heritage and culture that's predated even this young government on the planet, spiritual sovereignty cannot be denied, destroyed, or corrupted, because it is something that is intangible, and it is within the individual, like we see with this beautiful young lady here. Her country is under attack, but and its sovereignty has been impeded, but her spiritual sovereignty has not, which is why she is here and able to elucidate and explain to us why her country is under attack and what the issues are concerning her people and how we come out of it. So again, as long as our people recognize there are dual levels to sovereignty, the spiritual side will never be able to be taken from powerful individuals.
For you.
Yes, sir.
But you want the spiritual.
I know you
Take
do.
the Muslim,
You like to fight.
Hebrew Israelites and Christians. You know what we got? We got the Endless War Act.
Yes.
We passed in Congress.
This is
Since
true.
You want to be so spiritual. We passed it right up underneath your nose.
That's right.
When they had the bombing
Yes.
up in Boston.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting?
Well, the reason America is filled with killers. This is what they do. They foster and promote and produce and manufacture war all over the world, and then they play both ends against the middle. They will finance factioning groups and then pit them against each other. Rwanda, Hutus and Tutsis, anyone? And then go back after the devastation has been created and reap the benefits from the resources as they pillage and plunder and suck the very juices out of our mother called Earth as we sojourn.
I'm glad you got, and that's a good segue to understand the importance of divide and conquer. And I think that's one of the main issues when the people are not able to come together. I had this term thrown around, the 1% all the time, and it's like, it's an embarrassment to 99% being subdued and subjugated by 1%. Why is that?
Exactly.
So obviously it goes back to what brother just alluded to, is that the divide and conquer piece is to get people to believe that they have some kind of interest that is a personal quest as opposed to a unilateral quest for people as a culture, as customs are, because you have cultures, you have customs, you have people who have certain ways that they adhere to their level of creator. As you know, you are very much hard on the idea of an anthropomorphic God as someone you can't see. But when we talk about terms like spirituality and things you can find their origin that's probably overused and abused, in these institutions such as Catholicism and Christianity and even Islam in certain senses, but then we have to really come back and say, how do we reborn and reform, and transform some of the things that bring it back to what the brother is saying, and then we have to come back and go get internally rooted in recognizing the power of a people, and the power of people is their resistance. If you don't resist, then it will persist, right? So you got to continue to find yourself, in a consistent form of dedication to liberation of a people. Now, historically, you got to know the history. And she just predated 1948, what happened, how the plan was laid, the die was in the war. When all this took place, it was about how we can continue to maintain control over people's minds.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And touching on that, when you were talking about resistance to an occupation, specifically, the same applies, to the United States in Iraq or in Afghanistan. When these U.S. soldiers are killed, it's in response to the taking over of their land. It's in response to their civilians being killed.
Absolutely.
And that correlates with Palestine. I talked about over the weekend how 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. Yeah. And if you were just to turn on the news and you saw 2 Israeli soldiers were killed by terrorists, you would be appalled. You'd be like, how did this happen? Right. Not knowing the context, not knowing.
But they were standing their ground.
Exactly.
Let's bring it to that. Self-defense, stand your ground.
Yeah, and they're not they're not on land that is theirs. It's not their land.
Exactly.
They have the right to resist
to stand their ground.
way we find necessary.
Bingo.
Right. But see, I think some people will feel, and that's part of what they do because you have manipulation of news.
Excellent.
So if you don't have access to news and you don't go beyond, I guess BBC, you can try, I hope that they will be consistent. You have to go and find news independent journalism.
Absolutely.
But of course, obviously, I work for an organization that is in fact independent news, which is WRFG Radio. That is allowing us to get the alternative of what we are now looking at and listening to. And we also got to take advantage of this world of information coming through the internet. The internet has done wonders and marvels in allowing people to communicate, social media especially, about what is happening, to instantly put it up. If you got, any Instagram, if you have Twitter, Twitter, whatever they call it. All these things are tools that we have to use that really backfired on the original use of it. It has now taken it by storm. It is really out of control. They can't even control it if they wanted to. But one of the things that happens if we don't use it as an organizing, galvanizing tool to send information and messages. If you go back now, if you notice, Tehran is in the news quite readily now.
Exactly.
somewhat a moderate, or he's more liberal, and he's like, having a conversation with the United States. But if you go back to the origin of the 1979 revolution, in Iran, you remember the communication that got them to understand what was happening was via a tape that was circulated throughout the people. When Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, it was because they were able to communicate to the grassroots.
Oh, same way with Gaddafi.
Same thing, right?
Exactly.
The end result we see, of course, because who is the best military, killer of the world? We think that they were able to subjugate people by killing them with bombs and guns and shooting them, but that has nothing to do with the people's spirit, if I may. Because the truth is that bonding energy of saying that regardless of what we know, you can take this body, you can kill this body, but you're not going to kill a revolution.
Now, let me just comment briefly in reference to Syria.
All right.
The issue of Syria has to do with the fact that the subjective point that they are making in reference to Syria using chemical gas on its own people. Mm-hmm. Am I correct? Well, that same gas was used, not the same gas, because it was sarin gas that they used in Syria, right. But in Vietnam, they use Agent Orange, Agent Yellow, Agent White. They use these chemical agents on their own people. And many of the ex-military members were unable to get benefits after having been gassed by their own people. So what was the result of the capitalists? What was their reason and what they said would be best for a nation that just used sarin gas on its own people? To bomb the hell out of them. Now, what kind of insane logic is that? So when we talk about sovereignty, in the face of America and its minions, there is no such thing in the natural sense. That's why the only survival that we as indigenous people have is our spiritual sovereignty, is our internal strength, and that internal strength will then galvanize us as the plague of white supremacy continues to focus on controlling through militarization as well as homeland security, the American Defense Authorization Act, as well as other politically powered moves, stand your ground, and all this other garbage that they use so that the Zimmermans of the world can kill without any thought of retribution.
I want to ask Maruim a question because we talked about divide and conquer. And the media over here talks about the Muslim Brotherhood, oppressing the rights of women, mm-hmm. oppressing the rights of non-Muslims. Mm-hmm. And so, you told me that I know I talked to you and we discussed Mohammed Morsi mm-hmm. in a different light. So, yeah. I mean, can you explain your stance on the Muslim Brotherhood?
Because as a Palestinian, what happens in Egypt is directly correlated to how it will affect Palestine, especially Absolutely. Gaza, because of the proximity. They border each other. So under Mohammed Morsi, there was less restrictions on Palestinians in terms of moving between Egypt and Palestine. And so after the coup, after the military took over, Palestinians are now severely restricted. They destroyed, because of the Israeli siege on Gaza, mm-hmm. there are tunnels that are between Egypt and Gaza in order for basic goods to come in and to come out. And because of the destruction of these tunnels, people in Gaza are now suffering. In fact, last week, the first medical patient died because there wasn't enough medicine coming in to help these people, and it is because of the coup. It is because of the Egyptian military taking over, mm-hmm. and the Egyptian military is a very, very close ally of Israel.
Right, because I know they just let out Hosni Mubarak. He just got out of prison. Mm-hmm.
And now Morsi is going to be on trial, whereas Hosni Mubarak is free. It is unbelievable. It's ridiculous.
Is that a return to or remembrance of the coup and the assassination of
Sadat?
Sadat.
Yeah, Sadat.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the egregious way how he was taken out by at the military parade.
That's right.
Which actually was on the heels of a supposed peace treaty that was trying to be signed between, at that time, it was Sadat and Begin. I think
Malcolm Begin,
And
yes.
I'm against that peace treaty, by the way, because you are recognizing an illegal state, a state that is on our lands, of course.
And that's the point, when we talk about these world leaders coming together, making decisions, not from the will of the people, it shows you, again, a continued ongoing, if you will, supplanting of the real need for, if you will, sovereignty. And the people to really have a voice to say exactly what their people are going to determine based on their rights to self-sufficiency, because a lot of times we're looking at even the resources. Now, we're talking about people and their being human resources, but we're talking about the resources of the land, as Brother said earlier, about Mother Earth, and how she's being raped and pillaged, for the natural resources. Every time you see her in these mass wars or invasions,
we got to have that uranium.
Well, that's the point. And the uranium and all, going into the bowels of Mother Earth, which is to desecrate her, to use it for the industry, as our brother also mentioned as well. So we don't see, all the intricacies of why things are being done in these back rooms, these smoke-filled back rooms, deciding when the imperialism is going to strike again. And we got, of course, the face value of what a president of the United States, as we see him now, in terms of him being something that appears to be a better public relations, which is, of course, as we talk about, Obama, looking better to go and do imperialism. Imperialism has a new face,
yes.
Has a darker face, a color
Black
face,
power,
and it gives the impression that they're changing the way that they're, but no, he's just, again, a continuator, a perpetuator of the same, and some people have a problem with talking about him in that manner because obviously it's some wonderful victory that we have made to get a black man in head of the empire.
Well, you know what?
So the question becomes, and I'll finish. The question becomes whether we wanted to be a part of what it was that the power represents.
Exactly.
Or did we want to see the change in the way that that power was implementing itself internally in terms of what was going on within the domestic policies, as well as what's happening internationally. Absolutely. So now we get caught up and say, yeah, we won the victory, give him a chance. Oh, he's just trying, he just got there, he can't do but so much. But he does even more so than his predecessors has done because of that false sense of him being someone that appears to be of the same color of the third world peoples. Well, quote unquote third world.
I want to quote Malcolm X because he talked about this a long time ago. He said that black nationalism will be manipulated by the white supremacists.
Absolutely.
And so that's what they done took what Malcolm X said because they, the white supremacists, they studied Malcolm X more than our people do, unfortunately.
Yes.
You can't just took right. You can't be an oppressor if you don't study the oppressed.
Right. But they took his exact words because on record he was the first one to say there will be a black president, but he's going to work for the imperialists.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's going to make it seem, and everybody's going to be for it. And I'm seeing it unfold, but everybody forgets about that. Malcolm X talked about it.
And to this day, people are still brainwashed because Obama is a black president.
Right. Absolutely.
Let me chime in about another powerful sovereign nation. The only one that had not been breached until recently, and your show was one of the few that spoke of the new technology that was used called HARP. Haiti, como you baby ma, good. Haiti, sovereign nation.
Right.
So-called poor, impoverished, supposedly the poorest in this hemisphere. However, they could not go in and take this sovereign nation with conventional weaponry. Even though we're seeing, the various types of advanced technology and military force, some of the technology has not been revealed because the population, they use it to extract the resources of the earth. They use sound waves, they use lasers, sonar, but some of this very same technology that they use for imaging has also been used, just like they break up gallstones with sound, they can break up the mantle and the crust of the earth with that same technology, just with a larger control of sphere of sound. So when we talk about HARP technology and sovereign nations, Haiti was taken over with secret weaponry, and then they used that same information about, well, now you can get medical care and we can develop you.
But you know what's so funny, Gideon? Most of those scientists and most of those people developing this stuff look just like me and you.
Well, they're
But see,
working.
because we got people in our community talking about spirituality, it's like, you know, you got to remember the science mind. We don't want to hear all that. And
But they're talking about money.
That's
what
not
they're
only,
talking-
not
that's
only
why
money.
They would work for Monsanto. Oh, my daughter is a professor.
Okay.
She now just got hired at Monsanto. She's
Okay.
making 6 figures. We are living good. But
it's
working
not-
holding the devil's pitchfork.
But it's not only that, though. Like, let me just give you an example. Because you and the elder Prince, you know.
Yes, sir.
I'm always talking about battle strategy, and y'all always floating off into the skies about y'all's gonna save us. And I'm just like, man, you're defeated, man. I mean, I'm just like, really.
So my thing is when people are so oppressed, all they have is God. God
Thank
is
you.
the only being that is there for the people.
Okay,
The
but-
poor
And
people.
it is the faith that gets people through life.
Okay, now you know what?
Like, and I think about it as a Palestinian. If
Okay.
Palestinians weren't Muslim, if they weren't Christian, if they weren't religious people,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what would happen to my
Exactly.
people. It would be extremely difficult to live through life. If you
I
don't,
think-
if you believe that life right now is torture, and then you're just gonna die, you're just gonna be in the ground. There's gonna be no heaven.
Okay.
You know, it's hard to get through life. Why not just commit suicide?
Okay, I'm gonna use an example, and I want
Exactly.
I want all three of y'all to comment on this.
Yes, sir.
When I was a little boy, right? Now rabbits, their natural defense when they see you in the wild is to run, right?
Right.
My neighbor, they had a rabbit caged up in the thing, and me and a couple of my friends, we would take a stick. You know how kids are. We poke at it, poke at it, poke at it, right? It got to the point where the rabbit just
Went off.
lunged out, right? It lunged out.
Yeah.
So I think, Mary, what you're saying, our natural human ability is to pray to God for our defense, but when we take that away, I think we will be forced like that rabbit to defend ourselves.
Okay, so let me just.
Okay, all right.
That analogy is like, I understand the premise of it.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna, and all the respect, because we respect each other and love each
Oh,
other.
absolutely, absolutely.
And there's no battle about ideologies and ideas and what we feel. But when we talk about analogies in terms of nature, how nature is already in submission to the will of its creation. So therefore, we don't have to have what we see happens in a dogmatic way in terms of what we've been taught how we worship. And I think that is something that we misconstrue based on the fact that the worship has not been these rituals that we see now in a way that creates this anthropomorphic outside experience.
Yeah,
but I'm saying
Okay.
that in the way I'm complimenting what you're saying.
Okay.
Not to contradict it, but to say that we have to understand there's a difference between conscious
Right.
awareness, the ability to verbalize, to have a conversation, which animals don't do like we do in language.
Right.
But they do have their way of connecting.
Absolutely.
And
And
being,
communicating.
and being in homage
Exactly.
to their nature. So they're
Okay.
very much committed to being 100% a rabbit.
Okay.
And so when we talk about being 100% a rabbit, 100% an ant, 100%, then they're honoring their gifts, their life purpose, and their life worth, and they don't deviate from that unless they're domesticated,
Right.
unless they've been somewhat taken to a lab and altered,
Altered.
in terms of how they are to function.
Absolutely.
As we as humans have been
Right.
through genetic modified organisms, persons, and food.
Absolutely.
In terms of how we consume, how we think, how we've been
Yes.
taught.
Okay, so now-
indoctrination.
Right.
So a
Social
lot,
engineering.
right. So, a
Right,
lot,
so those are good
so a lot
uniting
of-
factors right
right,
there.
right.
Because one thing I can agree with the Bible, but then people argue me about interpretations. It says where 2 or 3 gathered,
Therefore,
there I am.
right.
However, I think unity is our power.
It
Now,
is.
however,
It is.
people might go to the people of Palestine and say, oh, well, those Muslims were killed. Oh, well, the Muslims, they were terrorists anyway.
Exactly.
Or if our, some of
They've
our
been
people,
profiled.
or those Hebrew Israelites,
Yes, terrorists.
they're thugs, or those people from Move, they
Right.
were, anti-police killers.
Right.
So I'm saying
The stereotypes,
we
yeah.
have to, even though I'm not saying drop your religion, I'm saying that the Endless War Act takes something that we hold dear, and they're going to kill us, and we can't even unite. Being Muslims, Hebrews, Nawabians, we cannot. And Prince Zebekiah,
Yes.
he did not hear what I was saying. I'm saying, look, I don't want to hear about Yah, this and that. That is not a uniting factor. It is not. You know what I'm saying? I respect the Hebrews. I respect the Muslims. I respect all the classes. But I'm saying it is not a uniting factor. He just said uniting factors. Clean water. I'm sure everybody else can agree. We don't want genetically modified corn, which they're now discovering is carrying the HIV virus.
But I think you
Wow,
have to give
you know?
credence to what Miriam was saying about
Right.
the lack of hope in a hopeless people under an oppressive militarized system that are already poor and are being driven from their land without a God consciousness, then the thought of some type of positive reinforcement is zero to none.
You know,
Something that I also want to mention is you were talking about, there's no unity under God. But I think something to note that's very remarkable is that in Palestine, you have a 15 to 20% Christian population, and the rest is Muslim. And they have intermarried.
Well, what about the Arab atheists?
I don't think they're.
You don't think? Are you
I
sure?
mean, of course there are. But
Are you
they're
sure?
Not, they're not a significant percentage.
They're not significant.
Yeah.
Oh, so these people are not significant. Man.
No,
Look
not
at-
necessarily. They're not significant. They're not of a significant percentage. As in, there aren't enough that
They're
are
minority.
out about it.
Exactly.
Right, just like the black males being shot down in the street. They're
Hello.
insignificant. Right, the 99%, the low minimum wage, they're insignificant. You see how that works?
No, I'm not saying they're insignificant. I'm saying it is not a sizable population.
So
of Arab atheists.
I think Marion has made a good point. But also, if you want to just oppose that and ask the question, so in all that uniting around that oneness of the Creator, God,
Right.
why is it not able to offset militarism? Why is it not to offset the apartheid? Why is it not being used in order to keep these Zionists from coming in and taking over land? Where is this God? Where is this particular?
I don't believe that.
I'm being rhetorical now. I'm being rhetorical because I'm not really. I'm just saying the
Right,
logic that I'm coming from here.
Well, I can answer
Trust
that
me,
question.
he's going to
though.
grill me tonight, so trust me.
Hello. I can
Okay.
answer that question.
Well, no. Let Marion respond
But
to that.
I believe that life is a test. Well, now we're getting into religious
Theology.
aspects. This is
Yeah,
like
but
as much.
that's part of it. It's
I
part of it.
believe
It's part
that
of it,
life
right.
is a test, and as a Muslim, I believe that we're put under difficult circumstances and we go through difficult obstacles in order to prove what life is. If life was all sunshine and rainbows, then what are we proving? What are we
Excellent.
going through?
Exactly.
It's easy.
Well, it is a purging process to determine the character of the individuals that have stated that they believe in this or that. It's simply like sovereignty. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about who is in control, you control your own mind, even though there may be outside forces that are manipulating your environment. But you have the ability to have independent thought and sovereignty over your mind. You may not be able to control the resources, but you are able to control your thought process. That's why this media has been controlled by white supremacists who keep their images going out for our children to look at them as the end all and be all, rather than our history, which shows we predate them, we're descendants from royalty, and that no matter whether we're being, the question was, why are these people who believe in all of this why are they still being oppressed? Because there's a time factor in all things. So that process has to take place, and ultimately we will be extricated.
Okay, I want to bring y'all back down to the natural world because Maruim said something so significant.
Yes.
That the white supremacists, they are so complex. I'm not going to say the white supremacists, I'm going to just say the power structure.
Power structure.
They would say, you know what? Maruim said that the Arab atheists, they're insignificant. So gather the Lebanese atheists. I'm saying, right, but no.
See how I get
Okay, no.
You gotta go let her off
Hear me
on that
out.
one.
No, hear me out.
Go ahead,
Hear me out.
go ahead.
I'm showing y'all how the mind works.
Yes.
I'm showing y'all I'm
Go
tapped
ahead.
into the most evil, oppressive government in the world.
In the world.
So let's take Lebanon.
Yes.
Let's take Pakistan.
Yes.
Let's take all these Arab countries.
Well, Pakistan
and we
is-
just want the Arab atheists.
Yes.
You see, they think you're the insignificant. Overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
Take them down. And what's going on?
Right.
In Egypt right now, we
Right.
don't want the Muslim Brotherhood. Is that not true?
That's it.
Well, no. I mean, it's really half the population that does want them. It's the people that
Right.
voted for them still want them. But there are
Okay.
these Egyptians who didn't vote for the Muslim Brotherhood
Okay.
now have their opportunity to
Yeah.
speak out against them.
But you know,
Right.
we see again talking about a misuse of power. You know, we
Yes,
talk about we can talk
exactly.
about the Nicene Council.
Well,
you know,
921
and the decree.
BC. BC.
So when we talk about coming together and saying that that if you don't believe in this particular doctrine or dogma, that that you don't want to be a Christian, then we're going to take your land and we're going to take and we're going to make you a Christian.
Right.
So this is something that's documented. It's not something that we just pulling out the air as some type of speculation, or assumption. The fact of the matter is that there was an organized body of men, who
Gangsters.
came along as patriarchal conquerors.
Right.
Exactly.
From the conquistadors, we
Yes.
can talk about, we can go across the board,
Yes.
and made a decision under the Catholic Church,
Yes.
Yes.
under Catholicism, to determine that that people are not going to be able to be self-determined or being sovereign or being able to
Exactly.
have a way of owning their thoughts before their own human purposes.
Yes.
So what they did, they actually came along, destroyed people, gave them, if you will, as you were trying, I know that this is part of what your crusade is, and well, I know that's not a word you probably want to use either.
No, mine is to expose the
But,
actual
but,
power
but I'm
structure.
saying to you, I got it. I'm clear.
Okay,
on
all right,
this.
okay,
I'm clear.
all right.
I'm not in any way confused about which way.
Right,
you
this
are.
goes to the
And I
atheists too,
respect
because
it.
they,
I respect that
right.
because one of the things that we have to say is that we have to re-examine those actualities which can be referenced as ways that people were subjugated and controlled.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons why you have Catholicism. Now you have this so-called nice Pope, who's coming along
Right.
and being very liberal. He's talking about atheists could be reformed.
That's right.
Redeemed. His
Right, you got the Republicans reaching out to the atheists too. But
right,
okay, all right.
So the whole idea is that when they play it's constantly a mind game of keeping up with the flow of consciousness, to offset it, to shift it, to give people a realizing belief, which is really different than knowing, because belief is what it is.
Right.
It's a doubt, about something that you can't prove, right? That's what a belief is. But the idea
No,
that
belief is not doubt. Belief is belief. Doubt is doubt. It's a difference. But I do understand your point.
when
Go ahead,
we
sir.
come to the tangibilization of what I know you're sitting to the right of me. I don't believe that. And I'm saying to you that when we understand the tangibilization of putting words into a way that can really manifest reality and,
Yes, sir.
and manifest materialism, manifest what we see, it's tangible. We can really see this, right? We can feel it.
Right.
When we get to that point, we can start talking about how we can organize around what's tangible by respecting the intangible.
Yes, sir.
Because we get here from the intangible because we don't know what happens when the sperm and the ovum come together.
Absolutely.
We're not in that process.
Right.
Before you know, we have a full-grown man saying, "I don't believe in God." And that's the free will. That's the free will of the consciousness.
Absolutely.
But my point is, going back to the Nicene Council, when they made a determination that they wanted to dominate the indigenous,
Yes.
who had no belief in this mystery God that we speak about. They believed in their capacity to nurture Mother Earth, to harvest, to understand the process of 13 moons and 28 days, how it all came into a succession of completion, which is consistent. They didn't have a clock, they didn't have a watch, they didn't have a calendar. They use those things that now are being used to govern and control the minds of a people so they can be able to have a microcosm, a micro programming device, which is your calendar, Gregorian calendar, which is Pope Gregory, 13th. And then you also have the clock, which is also a mechanical
Device.
that has nothing to do with time.
Right.
I mean, if it stops, nothing stops but that. It'd be twice, maybe right twice, a day, but it has nothing to do with real time. Now, that sounds mystical, but it's about being able to say, where did we fall off? We got out of tune with nature.
That is
Right, and I'm
absolute-
glad you said it
But let me
because-
just say this. The only point that I will disagree with my brother on is ancient civilizations didn't have calendars. We know
That's
Easter
no.
Island-
The ones that we talk about, no, we had synchronometers. We did have calendars. I'm not saying we didn't have
Okay.
calendrics. Was not what we know it is today.
Okay.
Because obviously the Olmecs and all of them.
Olmecs, Easter Island, the pyramids.
But they have multiple.
Absolutely.
They didn't
They're
have
all
one that was
astronomical.
uneven, unmeasured, inconsistent as the Gregorian calendar is.
Exactly.
So it's the difference between what they had and what we have now.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me say
I
this
agree
as
with
an
that.
atheist. I have a belief based on evidence, like the Zarnoff brothers. They want to media put, they're Muslims, they're terrorists. But see, I believe based on evidence of the American government, the way they treat our people, I said, okay, they're framing these boys. And that's when I heard when Maruim got on the radio and said, I don't believe that he did it. And I said, I agree, based on evidence.
You don't trust.
You know,
You can't
right.
There's no
trust.
evidence that they did do it.
Absolutely
But there's
right.
evidence that they didn't do it.
Both ways, right.
Yeah.
But there is but it just seems weird to me that his vocal cords, all of a sudden he can't talk.
Well, the evidence
know.
also that when you use the term insignificant in relation to what you really identified as American so-called black man, we are relegated to a point of insignificance that the world community has been given an image that they would have no problem destroying us and the world wouldn't have an issue with it.
But the power structure don't.
We have been relegated to that point of insignificance that you spoke of in reference to the atheists, which is why we see the unequal sentencing, which is why we see our children being slaughtered on the streets without any repercussions, because we have been dumbed down and
But you know-
forgotten our sovereignty as a people to fight. As my brother said, if you don't resist, it will persist. That was Jesse Jackson's
you know
rhyme thing going on right there. Go ahead.
Maruim, what's your take on this? Because
Well,
I
I
got to
actually
get
think
you.
that's really significant because Malcolm X has said time and time again, the black problem in the United States, what black people face, is not a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. And that's the problem when things happen in other countries, when people are being exploited and they're suffering and they're being oppressed in other countries. It's a human rights issue.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to black people in the United States, it's a civil rights issue. And it's isolated to the United States. And Malcolm X said we need to take that to the United Nations.
International law.
And that is the problem.
Well, see, what they have paid informants who collaborate with the oppressor, the civil rights leaders that are getting payoffs under the table through honoraria, through their speaking engagements, through their ability to manipulate and control the media, because they are surrogates and minions of the media government system programs that they're almost like CIA operatives. Working undercover and telling us to vote for the very system that is destroying us. Oh,
Exactly.
you one of the voters, ain't you?
Well, wait a minute.
look out now.
Hold on now. Let's say, you say that our children are dying in the streets, but our same children are joining the force and killing other children in other streets.
Right.
Well, they're trying to survive.
They kill you based on your decisions.
They kill you based on your desire to conform to their idioms and their philosophies and their traditions.
Right, their philosophy is get money and kill everybody else. That's gangsterism.
That's gangsterism, baby. It's mafioso.
So
you ain't no Cosa Nostra.
What's wrong with that?
That's what the government is.
When we do it, it's all good. You know what I'm saying? You wearing blue, he's wearing red. It's all good.
That's a gang. Yeah, I'm saying? If we was all wearing red, it would be police be up in this bitch.
I had to take a little cheap shot. Okay, but let's look at. It's just so funny how the government is so complex because Mary and I, we had a discussion about Bashar al-Assad, you know, whether he is or is not gassing his people. But I just find it very funny, Miriam, that they want to put a pipeline through Syria.
Yeah, of course.
Hey.
Yeah, I definitely believe that the United States has strategic interests in invading Syria, and I do not believe that takes away from the fact that Bashar al-Assad is a mass murderer. And I don't believe that takes away from the fact that he used chemical weapons on his own people. And the reason behind him using chemical weapons is that he's desperate. And another thing, he has used them before. His father has killed his own people before, and they have killed many, many Palestinians as well, especially the ones in the refugee camps.
So I would ask.
So is America.
I mean, and that's
yes.
And see, now you won't hear what she just stated again on the mainstream corporate media about
absolutely.
that.
Right.
You hear about them throwing out that he's a mass murderer, he does do crimes. But I would ask the question. It begs the question: what is the political implications of a bombing of Syria?
I do not. I'm not saying that the United States should bomb Syria.
No, I'm saying
no, you're right. He didn't say that. He just asked the question.
I'm saying to you that as with all that being said, and with that being a part of what we know in terms of information that is necessary for people to get a full understanding, because sometimes we don't want people to be killed regardless. You know?
Right.
Of course, because that is the number one priority.
Right, militarism is militarism.
Right.
That's how you look at it.
If
you chemically destroy your people, we're going to bomb you. It's like, you know, such an irony. You know, I mean, but my point would be
killing for killing
to educate people because people need to be more politicized because they're not. They're just reaction. They react to everything they hear. So the question I was asking, not saying that you're an expert on that, but I mean, I imagine after that, you know, lay out a treatise about what we know has happened. What are the political implications of a bombing of Syria? And where is Israel in that? You know, just by knowing historically, where is Israel in that equation when it comes to, and how close is Iran to that? Because when we look at that geography, it's all right there connected.
Hello.
You know, so the point would be is that there's a lot more than just the pipeline, because that's important, because they need to find a way to keep the machine, the oil machine running, the monster,
that
you know, it has to eat, it has to drink.
It has to eat.
So, but the point will be that at the expense of what? Of the people, the expense of the civilians, the so-called collateral damage. So my question could be rhetorical, it could be real. What are the political implications of a bombing of Syria?
Well, the thing is that this has never happened before.
Right.
The U.S. has never bombed a country that has so many strong allies. And that's what makes Syria so significantly different, is that if you bomb Syria,
Russia being one.
you're against Russia, you're against Iran,
China,
you're against China.
North
And
Korea,
and that's what I believe that the common people,
That's why
no
they're
wonder if you're an
negotiating.
analyst or a journalist, We don't know what
Right.
the implications
There you
would be.
go. So that's why they were able to negotiate, not
Right.
doing it. That's why it was good to send it to Congress, to try to delay the process.
Well,
Just to try to bully yourself or threaten yourself into it, but not do it because they know there's more implications that we can imagine based on those who are in opposition who are not in agreement. Like you said, Russia. We talk about the other countries that are not, even Britain didn't agree, which is always a strange thing when they don't all agree what is really going on behind closed doors.
Exactly. It's a strange thing
Strange,
when
yeah.
there are different
Now,
factors.
Maruim, you talk about mass murders, Bashar al-Assad. Did you know our new employees are Al-Qaeda?
Right.
Oh.
We support them. As
Right.
long as they take out Bashar, then our...
But that was the point that I wanted to
You know.
bring out,
Okay, well,
because
bring
most
that
of the
up.
leaders that we have taken out in the countries we've gone into, not we, I mean, scratch that. The most of the leaders that,
Yeah, be
hey,
careful, be
see
mindful.
how easy to get
Yeah,
co-opted,
be
get
mindful.
caught
There's
up.
been a lot of we since
we in
Obama.
America,
Yes, we
you know
can.
what I'm saying? We ain't running nothing but my mouth. Now, most of the leaders that have been taken out were ultimately trained and were
Right.
surrogates of America
Right
from
down here in
their
Georgia.
inception.
We trained right down
In
here
Georgia, at
baby.
the, what is it called? The
American School of the Assassin
the
Americans, right down
Americas,
up 285
the
here.
School of the Americans.
I trained all of them.
Of the assassins. Now,
That's what, yeah.
what we're finding in this point with Assad in Syria is that I don't believe he fits that mold to where he was being trained and had been trained by America. So as you stated, they don't know what the implications are. They know biblically that the scripture says that, oh yeah, you're not a scripture
Remember,
guy.
I'm the mind
Well,
of mind.
the history says that there's going to be Russia, Iran, and they're going to fight again. This is biblical prophecy being brought into place. So if Assad is not an American puppet and they began to bomb, but then they've already blinked. They've acquiesced. Because they've said, oh yes, we did use it, and we will let the international community come in and do inspections, and they will get rid of our chemical stockpile.
Wait.
Okay, and something that's
Okay.
really significant about the chemical weapons is that over 110,000 Syrians have been killed in about the 2.5 years in the civil war.
That's right.
About
And what is the factions? What are the factions? Who was killing who and why?
But let her make that
You-
point.
you-
The point was very
Right, go
good.
ahead.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then you have 1,300 around who died because of chemical weapons.
Right.
Meaning that less than 1%
Percent.
of Syrian civilians have been killed by chemical weapons.
Right.
And it begs the question, why did it not matter to the United States when people were being slaughtered and
Excellent.
slaughtered with Scud missiles?
Right.
Exactly.
That's
Mustard
just
gas.
what
And
it is.
Israel has used that,
Yeah,
used
mustard gas.
chemicals.
Oh yeah, and
mustard
Israel
gas.
has used white
Right.
phosphorus
And
against
you never
Palestinians.
heard
Just
about
recently.
it. You never even heard about it.
Yeah,
But
right.
it is documented. But I mean, and I really always, every time, see the conversation, people don't know what's going on within the context of a country and what's going on in the internal factions, what's the
Absolutely.
fighting, what are the divisions, who's on what side, and so we can know exactly why there would be a chemical
Exactly.
bombing.
Yeah.
Why is it that people are fighting and killing each other,
Right.
within their own country, looking like each other and saying, well, I don't trust you, I don't believe you, I don't believe what you believe, I want to kill you. So I would ask, that's why I'm saying to you that we have to be more inquisitive
Absolutely.
about what is really happening, not
Yes.
just saying, oh, they're killing each other.
Now we
Hey,
need to go kill some more.
Well,
the
it
blood,
needs to
hey,
be
the Bloods in California, again, you just made a reference to the Bloods and the Crips.
Right,
Why are they killing each other, looking like each other? What is behind that? And we have to determine what is really happening for what purpose.
Well, yeah, but something that's really significant, and this is not the way it is talked about in the media, is that most Syrian civilians are against the Syrian government. They make it seem as if it is
There
two
you go.
equal powers
Right.
that have the same resources, that have the same artillery.
And then a monolith.
And, and that's not true. You know, you have these like independent soldiers who aren't necessarily connected to Al Qaeda or to the Free Syrian Army, and they're just fighting for their independence. They're
Exactly.
just fighting for their families' independence.
Their sovereignty.
Exactly, and there's so many factions in Syria right now. To
Right.
be honest, nobody knows what is happening in Syria. We're going to find out what's happening in Syria after this war is over.
Now is why you know the reason why Iran and other Arab countries call America the Great Satan. I'll leave it there. Continue.
Well, I mean, Gideon.
Oh, you don't believe in the Satan either. You know what I mean?
But behavior. It's behavior. It's behavior. It's not behavior.
Right. Devil
Yeah.
shacks.
Right.
But I mean, what defines one person devil of the shacks maybe.
Right, there you
I mean, is the
Semantics.
One man's
Let me
revolutionary
ask you a
is
question.
another man's hero.
is the lion the devil to the antelope?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yes.
I just was wondering. So let's get back to Bashar al-Assad, because we have a military industrial complex that has to make some money.
Don't forget the prison industrial complex that is complemented
Yeah,
by
but I mean,
the military
I'm
industrial
speaking
complex.
of
Military,
Al-Qaeda.
right?
So then I ask, what is the solution? How do you stop more than 110,000 people being killed?
Well,
What is there to do?
That's a question I'm supposed to ask you guys.
Exactly.
Wait a minute now.
Because,
You don't want to ask me because I'm going spirit on you, Blake.
And that's
Yeah,
why I believe that the United States is very intelligent and very strategic
That's right.
with the way it conducts wars. When other countries, notably Middle Eastern countries, when they want to invade war, or when they want to declare war, and when they want to invade a country, they just do it because they want to.
Right.
Whereas the United States
And
has
will.
reasons, and it has always a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed. When
that they
invading-
created. That's the issue. See, they created an environment of tyranny, oppression, sickness, and disease, i.e. Haiti, and then say, we're here to save the day.
Yeah,
and they
called-
send all
right,
their minions in, and next thing you know, the people have the Bible and they got that land.
Well, that's the
Next.
point, and that's the point about being able to understand the propaganda machine.
Okay.
Because that's what we really are invaded by, the propaganda
Absolutely.
machine. So
Absolutely.
if you don't know what is happening in terms of where you're getting your news from, where you're getting your information from, who you're trusting to tell you what's happening, before they toe the line, because you see this more monolith of what happens when things get rough. Anytime there's any kind of crisis, you have to first find out what is happening in the immediacy of the crisis before it starts getting where everybody gets their talking points, where they begin to start saying, this is how we're going to follow this. But something happened like a bomb in Boston. If you don't get the first reports,
That's right.
you're going to find yourself,
Exactly.
confused after everybody starts agreeing on what they should say and how the corporate, monster says, this is how we're going to run this story. Same thing what's happening abroad. We don't get a chance because we're here locally. If you have to change from CNN, you have to go from those channels.
Yes.
You have to go to BBC and see what they're saying about it. You got to go to other international.
Al Jazeera.
Right, Al Jazeera, which sometimes, I think they're even going and getting somewhat co-opted,
True,
in a lot of
true.
ways. We just launched Free Speech Radio News. That is a daily coming out of course, Pacifica. A great unfortunate loss, to people.
Absolutely.
We carried it on WRFG live every day. Now we have to find an alternative to that because they could not fund themselves. So the independent, now you go back to realizing where the power is. If we don't take what we have in terms of the financial wherewithal that we have to support independent media, support what is happening with Maruim coming up, taking a stand, talking about what's happening to our homeland. We got to have those voices out there so we can have the alternative, so we can get the wisdom from the people who know best. And it's the same thing what you're doing here. This is a
Exactly.
perfect opportunity for us to come and have a conversation, unscripted, random,
Yes.
very much hardcore,
Yes.
but it's also speaking about the independence of media.
Yes.
And that's, if we're going to end on anything, we should be ending on how we can support independent media. How can we support this particular venue? How can we
But
support
not just
WRFG?
independent media, independent thought, period.
Which is independent media.
Absolutely, because
It's the same
independent
thing.
thought is what nurtures and supports
Wouldn't
independent media.
Doesn't that contradict your Bible, Gideon?
No, it does not, sir.
Doesn't it, so?
It actually promotes independent thoughts, but from a certain. You need somebody get
You are supposed to question your faith.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
definitely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we need to tithe to our independent media.
Okay.
If you put it that way, all the Christians, we would have, media is already the most powerful tool, but it is financed by the oligarchy that Cornel West and his compatriots talked about.
Let me
in
ask you a
reference
question,
to,
real quick question. Gideon.
Barak.
I'm going to ask you a real quick
Travis
question.
Yes, Travis.
The Vatican, is that a corporation?
It is.
Big time.
It not only is it a
Major.
corporation, it is a nation
Right.
within a nation.
Unto itself.
That's one of the most powerfully
Unto itself.
financially astute nations. But see, I would debunk the fact that America is intelligent. America is a
No,
beast.
no, it's very intelligent.
They are
No.
not intelligent.
It's very
Nobody
intelligent.
in there, right? Wait a
America-
minute now. Hold on.
Okay.
You on a spaceship in deep space, and you start blowing up bombs on the spaceship. Is that intelligence?
But they're intelligent enough to
It doesn't
print.
matter what
Right.
America's doing per se.
Right,
It's
it's
the fact
relative.
that most people think that the
They
United States.
think. There
Exactly.
you
In order
go.
to make people think something,
That's
you
right.
have to be intelligent in order to brainwash the
No,
masses.
you have to be devious. There's a difference.
Well, but it's still intelligent because, like I said, they have
Devious.
groups. They have groups that just
Right.
find out where the Arab atheists are
Right.
and gather them so we can form some rebels.
Well, that's
You know,
called-
take whatever stabilized
That's called
government.
infiltration, and that's called
Absolutely.
dealing with the people who have no
COINTELPRO.
alliance and they're mercenaries waiting to be sold. They are go to the highest bidder. They're in all our nations.
Well, simply in terms of the FBI or the CIA,
Right.
there's
NSA.
nobody on earth more powerful than them. The only intelligence agency that compares is the Israeli Mossad, and they all work
Well,
together.
don't forget the NSA now. But again, these are powerful groups
that's a
on the
sub-
face of
Yeah.
their militarized,
Right.
the militarization. The most powerful group on the planet. You're looking at the people right now.
Well, two things.
Yeah, I
so-
think, and
Right.
again, I
Okay.
know we got to be careful and mindful. We're talking about, what they have accomplished because of the ignorance of the people who ignore what is happening. Intelligence is relative.
Thank
They do utilize it to the best interest of how to make sure that they are countering your intelligence, hence the counterintelligence program of
Yes.
FBI and J. Edgar Hoover.
Right.
But the whole idea is that we have
COINTELPRO.
we all understand that we have to operate from a space of intelligence. Meaning we have to understand what is our intuition, our intel, what is the intel, what is it saying for us to do so we can organize. One of the things that we got to do is get more telepathic because, anytime you
you.
spread the word on this particular medium, it's going to be trying to be stopped, blocked, or whatever. So that's another level of being able to say that how do we communicate without having to say what we're going to say because you got people who work 24/7 to make sure that information doesn't get back to the people.
It was Ebonics. It was.
So I think that it's important, in the culmination of this program, is to be able to make sure that we hear Miriam.
right.
Absolutely.
Hear that voice loud and clear. Give her a
Yes.
venue, a format to speak.
Absolutely.
And being able to respect the fact that she's not just speaking, in a vacuum. There are many who need to have the same conversation because we can echo the same sentiments.
She's an ambassador for her nation. I know you got a little time, so go ahead.
Okay, well, in order to, like I said, achieve these victories, I'm gonna need Maruim back on, and I'm gonna need Waneek back on, I'm gonna need Gideon back on.
Yeah.
So I can conquer the world. With that being said, we out. Peace. Oh, no, I'm sorry. So we can conquer the world.
Oh my goodness, there you go. So you do believe in peace?
That's a Christian.
We
What I'm saying, and twist it up into some type of Christian concept.
So
always.
it be.
Oh, and don't miss WRFG tonight. We're
Yeah,
gonna
midnight.
Midnight.
Yep.
Brother Waneek, I'm gonna be on the hot seat.
Yeah, nap time jazz.
Nap time jazz, and we're gonna have Jeremiah Camaro on there too.
That's right.
Oh my
Contradiction.
goodness.
Yeah, contradictions with the movie. And so, with that being said, we out. Peace.
Yeah.
Great.
For shizzle, man.